My name is John Erickson. I've been told that I am UNCC's first dorm student, which was back in September at that time of 1969. And I remember clearly, it was 45 years ago nearly, but I was allowed to register a day early and go ahead and unpack and get in the dorm a day before anyone else did. And it was in Sanford Hall at that time. Sanford Hall was designed to be the women's dorm, and Moore Hall was going to be the men's dorm. But Moore Hall wasn't finished. I'm in Sanford Hall all by myself, and I was in the front of the building near one of the top floors. And I unpacked, was just listening to some music in my room, and I heard a knock at the door, and opened it up, and there's a young guy there, a student named Chris Dooley. He just said he had been driving by. He was a UNCC student. He knew the dorms were new. He saw a light on and he just wanted to check it out. I said, well, yeah, sure. So came in and we talked for a while. And then a couple minutes later, there was another knock at the door. And I opened it up and there's this little tiny lady with a plate of brownies. And Chris recognized, I had no idea who she was. Chris recognized her right off and just said, oh, Miss Bonnie, how are you doing? And she recognized him and said, you know, hi Chris, how's your family, how's your mama, how's your daddy, that kind of thing. And they talked for a few minutes. And then she turned to me and she said, well, you must be John. And I said, well, yes, ma'am. And she said, well, I heard you were here all by yourself, so I brought you a plate of brownies. And I said, well, that's really nice. And my thought at the time was, the maids are so friendly here. And that was the end of that. I didn't think about it anymore until about 3 or 4 days later when we had freshman orientation. Chancellor Colvard was speaking, and I was drifting in and out of attention. And then he said, and I'd like to introduce the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, Bonnie Cohn. And then he said, well, come on up, Miss Bonnie. And he said that, I looked up, and it was Miss Bonnie Cohn walking up to talk to us. And I thought to myself, I thought she was the maid. What an idiot I am. She's the Vice Chancellor. I'd run into her a few times a year over the next 4 years or so. She was always very nice, very friendly, knew everybody, knew what was going on around campus. 20 years later, my wife was working at Countryside Montessori School, which at that time had a building at University Place. Bonnie Cohn is touring University Place with all these dignitaries and big shots from Raleigh and who knows where. And she goes into my wife's school. My wife was working in the office at the time. And my wife, Lynn, recognizes her immediately because she went to UNCC also, and just said, oh, hi, Miss Bonnie. My name is Lynn Erickson. I don't think we've ever met, but you might remember my husband because he was UNCC's first dorm student, and you brought him a plate of brownies back in 1970. And she said, oh yes, honey, I remember John, and it was 1969. Occasionally over the years, I would run into her, because she always lived in this area, right across the street actually. But I'd see her at stores here and there, and would always stop and talk to her and reminisce about that. And she always remembered it, was always really, really kind. And almost always there was like a line of people whenever she was out there who just wanted to talk to her, because that's how she was. I have to have a brownie. I hope they're as good as the ones I had 45 years ago. Thanks so much for doing this.